Hi, Frankie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I love Daisy Jones and the Six, but I'm also a huge Fleetwood Mac fan. So a lot of my love comes from the fact that it is very Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks of the show. But what's so fascinating about the music is that it does have like reminiscent tones of Fleetwood Mac. It has that feeling of the 1970s that we kind of all love and flock to, especially I've realized millennial women tend to flock to that era of music. And so for you as a music supervisor and kind of being a part of bringing that tone to life, how important was it for you to kind of pay homage to the era that it is in and the band that we are all thinking of while watching it, while also making it so original and new on screen?
Well, I think one of the things was, the hiring of the right producer. And, we hired Blake Mills for a very specific reason that he could make music that he just feels in his heart and not have it worrying about whether or not it's going to be a hit or are we making like a track that's going to get radio play. And that was the thing in the 70s. They were just making music. It wasn't like, oh my god, I'm making a song to become a single like it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the originality of just the time period of the 70s and the originality of our original music, they coincide. And I think that's what I guess the icing on the cake is.
Yeah, and I think it was my favorite Fleetwood Mac song is Silver Springs. So when they were fighting over whether or not that song was going on the album, I was like, this is Silver Springs. This is just Silver Springs. It is the fight that like I'm still mad about. And it was so cool to kind of see those moments because like my dad was a classic rock fan, so like that's kind of where I got it from. And so I've heard all the stories about how bands fought and everything, and I think that's part of the draw of Daisy Jones.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, with this cast, though, you also there's obviously the legacy of Riley Keough's family playing a part in why a lot of people are like, oh, this is cool, and like the guitar strap that was Elvis's is like that nod that everyone's kind of picking up
Yeah.
on. But you also have people like Sam Claflin who like we all know from the Hunger Games and things like that. And so seeing him in this role is very different. And you were leading the band camp that we've heard a lot about on the press tour. How was it kind of dealing with like differing levels of knowledge with music and where they are and where they need to be for these characters? How was it kind of like navigating all of that in like whatever little time you guys actually got to kind of
Well,
workshop all of it?
we were very lucky that we ended up getting quite a bit of time to get the cast ready. And like you said, everybody was at like a different level. Will Harrison already knew how to play rhythm guitar, but we needed to teach him those kind of little, lead guitar type
Mm-hmm.
tricks, licks, and things like that. Josh Whitehouse, who plays Eddie, knew how to play guitar but didn't know how to play bass. So, but it's an easier transition to go from guitar to bass. Sam and Riley were definitely more of the newbies. I know that Suki had done some keyboards as far as like writing songs, but never really. She doesn't know how to like read music and play it in that regard. And the same thing with Seb. He had some drumming experience, but not supposedly at the level of what this rock band was or is. And so everybody got a schedule during band camp. Like, we know that Sam needs 2 hours for guitar, but Josh only needs 1 hour for bass. So we'd split things out just based on the need and but it also was just the most important thing was like making sure that all these characters were together, kind of living like a band in during band camp where we had all these separate rooms like you know Suki's in the back room playing the piano. We've got Josh in this room. We've got Will practicing in this room. We've got Seb, and like everybody kind of had their little space. And then after lunch, we kind of all got together in one big rehearsal space, and everybody got to kind of play everything together at that point. So there was lots of where we would just play along to the pre-record. We'd play along with a click. We would just let them play it live just to kind of see how they were doing and how things were sounding. So, I think obviously the time and the process that we kind of put together with me and the coaches, and it really kind of balanced itself out where Sam was able to catch up, Riley was able to catch up, and by the time we finished, they were like, I'm seriously done with band camp. I don't want to do this anymore. Let's just shoot the damn show.
Like, I'm good, thanks. I got it.
Yeah,
I
I got
understand.
this.
When it's funny because I know I was classically trained in piano and then I play guitar, so I can always spot when someone does not know what they're doing and they're just like I know most people can't, but I can always see when someone's actually not playing the piano or they're not playing the right notes on a guitar.
Yeah.
And with a show like this where it is a band, was it always kind of important for you guys to make sure that it was like no one ever had that moment? Like, was that the goal in teaching them and making them learn how to play all these instruments?
It really was the goal because we wanted them, once they got on, into the scenes where they're performing as a band, which we're going to get to see, soon.
Yep.
Um, we didn't want them to have to think about where their hands were, or am I in the right place on the keyboard. We wanted them to think about the acting part at that moment, which is why we kind of felt like the band camp was so important. So they weren't thinking about, like, do I have my fingers in the right place? But I was on set every time there was a music performance, just checking all of that stuff just to make sure that it looked real. But, also at the same time, they were playing it, so we knew it was real. So, it was just, it was just that kind of little safety net that we had, just to make sure that we had that true authenticity of, this band is playing this music.
Yeah, and I think so I've seen the whole season, but the episode where Daisy joins the six on stage and they sing live for the first time together, uh, like ready for them to actually go on tour. Every time I talk up to Amazon, I'm like, can you actually have a Daisy Jones tour? Because I would like to go
You
on
really
tour. I
won't.
would like to go.
I've been saying the same thing.
I was like, I would like to go. Can you do it? But I also think it is. I did a whole thing on this, but I do think it comes down to the fact that like a lot of people like my age love all these bands and we never got to see them in their heyday.
Mhm.
And so something like Daisy Jones and the Six or Stillwater from Almost Famous and these classic rock bands that are fake, we flock to because we're like, oh, we those we could see because they're not actually real. But with something like a tour, is that something that you guys kind of had in mind when you were training them, or would it be another level of them having to kind of go through another band camp and make sure that they are at the going on tour level of ready to perform?
Well, I think, now, like, we finished shooting last year. So,
Mm-hmm.
I would certainly want to have another band camp to kind of just get them prepped and ready. But I can tell you, like, it was always my thought, like, I remember sitting down talking to the actors and just saying that, my goal is that if you were ever asked to go out on tour, that you guys could play these songs. That is my goal of band.
Mm-hmm.
And I have these visions of, seeing Daisy Jones and the Six on the marquee outside the Troubadour, or them being on Saturday Night Live, because I
Mm-hmm.
thought it would be such a cool thing for them to be on Saturday Night Live like they were in the show, and
Mm-hmm.
then have the actors do all that crazy Saturday Night Live acting stuff too. So I just, I always wished for it and hoped for it, and you never know. I did 6 years of Nashville. We did tours with the Nashville
Mm-hmm.
cast, and they're now going out again 10 years later, and they're doing a show again in the UK, which like is just amazing and fantastic to me. So my fingers are crossed that there will be a Daisy Jones and the Six tour.
I would love it. The music is obviously like the important part of the show. Like, yes, again, we're all here because most of us are Fleetwood Mac freaks. So we're all like, this is close enough to Fleetwood Mac fan fiction as a TV show. We're gonna watch it, but the a lot of the tension throughout the series does come through the characters with their songs. Like the minute that they were like, "Oh, there's only one microphone," and Billy and Daisy had to sing on the one microphone, I was like, "Oh no, this is going to go one of two ways, and it's not going to be great either way for me." But when you are kind of working with music as a tension builder and with a cast of actors who are also trying to act through it, how do you guys find the balance between kind of when you have to step in as a music supervisor and be like, hey, like that doesn't work that way, versus like, yes, we will make this one exception to like how music is actually made and works so that the tension of the show can continue.
You know, as the music supervisor on this, there was so much detail. Like I worked with the guy who was in charge of all of the instruments. What year I got to see pictures of every instrument. I got to see the recording studio. I was, we were all like, the music team was there saying, hey, this is where your hands need to be. Hey, that tape machine in the back isn't working. It needs to be working. So there were all these like little inner things that, you know, I had to be on set for just in case a question even came up. Like, talking out loud in a recording studio, without headphones, or can you hear what's going on in the other room? So there's all these different kinds of nuances. And, when we got to those moments where like, oh, we're putting them on the one microphone, I mean, it was scripted that way. So, I would have addressed that earlier in the process had it, that not being realistic, but it's completely realistic and believable that two people would sing on the same microphone and be able
And
to
I
get
think
it across.
yeah, I with something like this, do you have any say in like the music that is used throughout the show that's not Daisy Jones and the Six? I'm talking about
Yeah,
like
I
the
do all that as well.
okay, because I'm doing a whole piece on that because I'm obsessed with the songs that are used throughout the series that are like real classic rock songs.
Yeah,
Because again, the minute the Fleetwood Mac song came on, I just truly lost my mind. Um, which I will keep that until the episode drops. But like
yeah,
that moment for me was like, oh my God.
crap, yeah.
But I do love like I saw a lot of commentary online being like, oh, when are they gonna release the theme song? And I was like, that's a Patti Smith song. That's not a Daisy. This
Yeah.
is Patti Smith. So what were did you have any kind of limitations, or were they just kind of like, all right, here's the themes, here's what we're trying to do, what songs do you suggest?
Well, I think, there's always a limitation because we don't have an
Mm-hmm.
endless amount of money to spend on songs.
You can't pay Paul McCartney $1
Yeah,
billion.
exactly. I mean, I desperately tried to get Led Zeppelin. I can't even tell you how like
Oh,
Led Zeppelin needs to be in the show. Um,
that would have been the perfect timing too.
you know what I'm saying? Like we wanted to kind of show, between Scott and Scott, he's such an incredible wealth of just music as well. He loves music. So he and I really kind of were a great team together of like, hey, here's a playlist of stuff. What do you think? And we wanted to show that there was so much different kind of music happening in the 70s rather than just the standard classic rock. There's that easy listening, like Barry Manilow. There's, some the early beginnings of funk. There's
Mm-hmm.
early beginnings of disco. There's, classic rock bands that just never were number ones. There's a lot of that stuff in the show that because it was the beginning of punk. So we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to kind of show like a full gamut of what the 70s music situation was because
I
it was
think it
also great.
yeah. Yeah, I mean it's there's a reason that there are people who like that's the only music they still listen to, is because it is genuinely like such a great time for music as a whole. I think what is so fascinating to me, except especially because granted I'm an exception. I'm 31, but I grew up with a dad and mom who were older. And so like my dad was 71 when he died. he that was his music. Like that's what he listened to, was everything from the 70s. And so I grew up listening to it. And so watching this show, I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's in there. That's amazing. That's in there. But did you guys ever have the thought process of like, there are going to be younger fans of this book who come in and this is the first time they're hearing some of these songs?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I kind of felt like this could be like a resurgence of, bands like, listening to, Sirius XM classic rewind
Mm-hmm.
or, classic vinyl or just the 70s channel. Just to, I mean, like, there's so many great film and television projects that do that, where they bring stuff and kind of like my kids know a lot of that music, not because of me, but because of like trolls, covers, things like that, So, for us, like we wanted to also, the fact that we had this 1970s rock and roll band, we wanted
Mm-hmm.
them to also, we wanted to make sure that you always felt like you were within that time period. So having those recognizable songs kind of splattered throughout the episodes, you know exactly where you are. And
Mm-hmm.
I really hope that it's a resurgence of people wanting to download that music, um, just because it's just, again, it they weren't worried whether or not it was a hit. They
Mm-hmm.
just made music that felt good to them and felt right. So to me, that's music that needs to be heard over and over again.
Oh yeah, and I think of one of my favorite, like, well, two, because I love that the chain isn't everything anymore. Like it's, I'm like, great, drop the chain in
Yeah.
everything, whatever. But I do love like the song "Ooh La La" by Faces is everywhere, and I was just like, I used to love this song, but like no one knew what I was talking about. So it's weird that that like it is everywhere all of a sudden. Um,
Vision.
but I'm like, it's really cool, kind of like the music that you, because I do know like a bunch of younger fans are going to be like, what song's this? Because the Patti Smith one, I was like, that's not a Daisy Jones song, and I hope all of you just go and like listen to Patti Smith now. But
Yeah.
it is really cool to kind of see how you guys man the actual Jones songs with stuff like that. But I do know a lot of fans of the book are wondering where the other albums are, because Daisy Jones and the Six don't have just Aurora in the book. Did you guys have plans to record other albums? Is there going to be more that you can say anything about? Like, what is kind of the future of like the other music that existed in the novel but hasn't been released for the show?
Well, maybe there will be another record that they just made and there's no show attached to it.
I would love that. And then they can go on tour, and then
Exactly. Sorry, I
can
got
go the
something in
whole.
my throat.
No, you're fine. It's it can go all around. It is though one of the things that I think a lot of people connect this show with is Riley Keough, and her family's history with music, and kind of how this is her introduction. Was that ever like something like on set she was worried about? Because it is the first time she's singing that people are hearing Riley Keough sing, which is odd when you think about Elvis's granddaughter and Lisa Marie's daughter, that this is the first time you're hearing her sing.
For her, she did feel like she didn't want to be compared.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would want that. You just you want to be kind of, who you are and without any kind of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And she's wasn't super confident, in her abilities. So sorry about my throat.
Okay.
She wasn't super confident about her abilities, but she did like kind of grow into it. And I think, both for her and for Sam, again, we wanted their authenticity that they brought to the table. So even though the book says she's a big belter and all this stuff, it's like Riley just wasn't a big belter, so
Mm-hmm.
the songs were created like obviously with, hey, this is what her voice is, and we're going to work to make it the best voice that it is, which I think we successfully did and that she did mostly, because she
Mm-hmm.
was the one that worked her tail off to make it happen. And I think that she's got something in her repertoire now. Like she says, she goes, I made a record, you know, and she's really proud of that. And I think, the only thing that I can say as far as like a comparison to Elvis or even her mother is like, she does this little thing with her mouth when she sings sometimes, and it's got this little like Elvis twist to it. And I think I told her that at the premiere. I was like, I'd been, I've been asked the question, and I was like, this is what she do. She goes, I do? Really? You think so? And I was like, yes, you totally do. And it's got this Elvis thing. And she's like, oh my God, that's so great to hear.
Well, it is funny because it's like a testament to her. It took me way too long to realize, like, she looks like Elvis, and it took me way too long to realize that she is Elvis's granddaughter. Like, it just, I was like, who is this actress? She's very good. And then like looked her up and was like, oh, I'm an idiot. Like, I should, like, I can see it in her face. But like, she's just very talented, and seeing her in the show was so kind of cool because it was like, oh, it's like nodding to the fact that, like, yes, this is her family history, but she is just so good singing in this show that it is shocking how like a lot of them where they were when they started, because they're all very good. Like, it's very believable that is a band and they play music together.
Well,
um
I'm glad she got to do it attached to her amazing acting.
mm-hmm.
Like the combo of the show with the singing. I think that if she ever did want to do a record by herself, that was like the perfect step for her, to kind of do this type of thing.
Yeah, I loved it a lot. Like, the show truly was like, I just was shocked by, granted, again, I love Fleetwood Mac, so it's not that surprising, but like, I was shocked by how much I loved the music. Like, so many songs just get in your head and don't leave, because like Regret Me and Honeycomb are two songs that, like, different parts of it get in your head and then you're singing it walking around. um and so, as a final fun little question,
Mm-hmm.
what is your favorite song that you got to have the band learn how to play?
I mean, I loved all of them. Um, but I think my favorite is Let Me Down Easy. And
Mm-hmm.
I love the river too because it makes me dance.
Rivers.
But Let Me Down Easy, one of the reasons why I loved it so much is you see them kind of creating it. And I love that like backstory that you have within a show where you're seeing something kind of come to fruition. And but the song itself is just, it's so great, and it's just the way they sound together is pretty magical
Mm-hmm.
on that song.
Yeah,
Pretty magical.
it really is. I am trying to buy this on vinyl. I keep forgetting to do it, but I was like, I gotta buy the Aurora on vinyl. I know you probably have it right there. I want it so bad.
By the way,
I
this is a prop from set. It's not the real record.
Yeah, I saw they were releasing it, and I was like, I need to get that on vinyl. And just add it to my collection and pretend that it is a band because
Yes.
my family asks. But yeah, thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it. I always love talking about music, so this was great.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.